There's a word that sounds like it belongs to the past, a word you associate with old buildings, black and white photos, and dusty factory floors. A problem we already solved. That word is asbestos, and the uncomfortable truth is, we didn't solve it. We just stopped looking. Because asbestos isn't one problem, it's three problems stacked on top of each other. One, the asbestos that was intentionally installed in millions of buildings. Two, the asbestos that sneaks into products through contaminated minerals. And three, asbestos that's naturally in the ground in places with no mines, no factories, no warning signs. Just wind, soil, and people living their lives. And once you see those three layers, you start to realize why asbestos might be a bigger problem than we thought. 1. The miracle that made perfect sense. For most of human history, fire was the enemy. Cities burned like dry forests. A single spark could erase a neighborhood. So when people found a material that wouldn't burn, that could be woven, packed, sprayed, mixed into cement, it felt like a miracle. Not magic, chemistry. A mineral that forms in long, thin fibers, strong, flexible, heat-resistant. A rock you can spin like thread. That's why it spread everywhere. Roofs, pipes, boilers, shipyards, insulation, tiles, ceiling panels, brake pads, gaskets. If the 20th century had a default setting material, this was it. It didn't just make buildings safer. It helped reshape the modern world. And that's what makes the story so dangerous. Because the material worked, it solved real problems. And that's exactly why we used it long enough to create a new one. 2. The danger isn't asbestos. It's the size of asbestos. Asbestos isn't terrifying because it's a chemical poison. It's terrifying because it's a shape. These are fibers, tiny needles, small enough to float, small enough to travel, small enough to get deep into the places in your body that were never designed to eject them. And once they get in, your body treats them like an intruder. Immune cells try to engulf them. But asbestos fibers can be too long, too stiff, too stubborn. So the body does what it does when it can't win. It inflames. It scars. It keeps trying. For years, sometimes for decades. That's the part most people don't feel in real time. Asbestos doesn't behave like an instant danger. It behaves like a delayed fuse. Exposure now can become disease much later. So even if a country bans asbestos today, the legacy of decades of use doesn't vanish tomorrow. 3. The first trap. If it's in a building, it must be dangerous. Let's be precise because this matters. Asbestos is most dangerous when it becomes airborne. If asbestos-containing material is sealed, intact, undisturbed, risk is much lower. The real danger shows up when it's cut, sanded, drilled, crushed, demolished, weathered, or disturbed. That's when fibers can enter the air, which leads to the first modern problem. We built an entire world with asbestos inside it, then handed it to generations who were never trained to recognize it. Renovations, DIY repairs, school maintenance, old ceiling panels, pipe insulation, aging construction. All it takes is one project, and suddenly a past problem becomes a present one. 4. The second trap, the definition game. You'd think asbestos is a clear scientific category, but in the real world, asbestos often becomes a legal label, and legal labels can create blind spots. Regulations don't always track anything that can harm lungs. They track a specific list of minerals, a specific fiber shape, a specific measurement rule, which creates a loophole. If a fiber is dangerous but doesn't match the official definition, it can be treated as if it doesn't exist. That's not just a technical detail. That's the heart of the problem. Because your lungs don't care what a label says. They care what enters the air. 5. The third trap. The microscope you choose changes the truth. This is one of the most unsettling realities in the asbestos story. 2 labs can test the same sample and tell you 2 different stories. Because different methods see different things. Some tests are fast and cheap. Some tests are slow and sensitive. And not all tests reliably detect the smallest fibers, the ones you most want to catch. So in any high-stakes situation, the question isn't just, did you test? It's how did you test? And what did your method fail to see? 6. when a city turned to dust. Now we reach a moment that should have forced a permanent reckoning, a catastrophe where buildings didn't just collapse, they were pulverized. Concrete, glass, insulation, construction material turned into dust. And people breathe that dust. And the hard part is this. In an event like that, the difference between safe and unsafe can depend on what you counted, what you ignored, and what you were equipped to detect. The public doesn't experience this as a debate about microscopy. They experience it as trust. They're told it's fine, or it's not. But the real world is rarely that simple. 7. The consumer product problem. Nobody is adding asbestos, so why is it there? Here's where it starts to feel like the universe is playing a trick. Asbestos has shown up in places that make no sense, not because someone intentionally added it, but because of geology. Asbestos forms in certain environments in Earth's crust, and some minerals we mine, used in everyday products, can form near asbestos, or even mixed with asbestos fibers. So if you mine those minerals, and your quality controls aren't built to detect the fibers, they can hitchhike into products. That's how asbestos becomes a contamination story, not an ingredient story, which means you can do everything normally and still end up with something you never asked for. 8. The town that became a warning. There are places that expose the asbestos story in its rawest form. Places where the mineral wasn't just used, it was woven into daily life through dust, where workers brought it home on clothes, where families got exposed, where the line between workplace hazard and community hazard disappeared. And the worst part is, when contamination spreads quietly, it can take years, sometimes decades, before the pattern becomes undeniable. Asbestos doesn't need drama. Time is enough. 9. The global reality. Asbestos never really ended. A lot of people assume asbestos is banned everywhere. It isn't. Some places have strict rules. Others still allow or use it. And even when one country tightens controls, the global supply chain can bring contaminated materials across borders. Because asbestos is not like a chemical that breaks down. It doesn't expire. It persists. It survives heat. It survives weather. It survives time. Which means once a society has built with it, the cleanup problem becomes generational. 10. The biggest misunderstanding. If we banned it, why are we still finding it? Because asbestos has two lives. Life 1, asbestos used in civilization, buildings, infrastructure, ships, schools. Life 2, asbestos as a natural and geological phenomenon, present in rock and soil, moved by erosion and wind, mixed into other minerals. And both lives collide with one human behavior: disturbance, construction, renovation, demolition, mining, traffic over dry soil, even storms. Asbestos is a hazard that can be activated, and we live in a world that activates dust constantly. 11. So should you be worried? Not in the way panic wants you to be, but also not in the way denial wants you to be. Here's the sane middle ground. If you live or work in older buildings, treat renovations like a serious operation, not a casual weekend project. If you're dealing with old insulation, tiles, ceilings, pipe wraps, textured coatings, assume nothing. If you're in areas where naturally occurring asbestos is known to exist, understand what that means for dust exposure during dry seasons and high winds. And most importantly, don't let the word asbestos become background noise, because the real danger isn't just the mineral, it's what happens when society decides it's old news. 12. The ending that matters. Asbestos is a mirror for how modern civilization handles slow disasters, a material that saved lives from fire and then quietly took lives through time, a story where the details matter: which microscope you used, which fibers you counted, which definition you chose, which risks you communicated, which risks you minimized, and whether we're willing to learn the same lesson. Again, that a miracle material can be real and still be deadly. So the question isn't just, what is asbestos? We already know that. The real question is, what other hazards are still hiding inside definitions detection limits, and blind spots. While we assume the story is over, if you want more investigations like this, where science, history, and reality collide, subscribe to Xpress-Curiosity. Because the universe isn't just full of answers. It's full of problems we thought we solved and questions we still haven't learned how to ask.